Hi everyone, good to see you all. Today we're going through the second part of the growth series on learning from mistakes. So the outline for today, I'm going to first give you an overview. We're then going to move and touch basis on making a mistake, reconciling, and then finally dive deep into learning from mistakes. We all know what to do when things go right. The true test of life is when things go wrong. Have you ever noticed that when it comes to other people, when they have a problem, the solution seems so easy? Like you even question them, how do you not know what to do? Like it's obvious, no? Why is it so difficult for you to see what's actually going on? Why can't you see the bigger picture? Can't you see what this person is doing to you? They've done the same thing to other people in the past. Why would they be any different to you? I think it's easy to unravel a situation when you don't have emotions involved. Emotions make it a lot harder to process things. There's a collision, a misunderstanding between the heart and the mind. And they say the greatest distance in a room isn't between two walls, but rather between the heart and the mind. But let's take a step back. Mistakes. Mistakes are not necessarily a bad thing. They can be protective. Often when we refer to a mistake, we always think of something negative. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the times it is, but not all the time. When a child touches a flame and gets hurt, yes, they feel pain. They might start screaming, they may start crying. But then they learn to never touch the flame again. They learn that the fire is dangerous. In fact, in healthcare, there's a condition called congenital insensitivity to pain, CIP, which is like a rare genetic condition where you're unable to feel pain. And as a result, it's very dangerous. Why? Because you can end up harming yourself. You can touch a flame and it won't hurt you. You won't feel pain, but you're harming your skin, you're harming your body. And if there's no pain, your body struggles to process that this is harmful. So mistakes aren't always a bad thing. Now, what I just talked about is something called acute pain. Acute pain is short-term, medically it's less than 3 months, and it's good for you, it's protective. Like you break your arm, which is you break your arm and it hurts, which is your body defending you and warning you to be careful because there's an injury there. We also have chronic pain. This is like a long-term pain, longer than 3 months. And this pain is not good for you. It's not protective. Like you've broken your arm, it's fixed, there's nothing structurally wrong with it anymore, the x-ray is clear, but it still hurts for some reason, even though your arm is okay. The same applies to mistakes. An ongoing mistake and ongoing pain is not good for you. It's no longer protective. It's exhausting. It's draining. It feels like a burden. So, let's break down learning from mistakes. First things first. Why did the mistake happen? Mistakes can be from life decisions or interactions with others. Life decisions kind of comes under the umbrella of God's will and your will. Like how do you know when to hold on to something? How do you know when to let go of something? Which we can have a whole separate discussion another time. But instead I'm going to focus on interactions with others. So let's talk about you as a character. Are you self-righteous and always think you're right? Are you manipulative and going to make others around you feel bad, even though they've done nothing wrong? Is that person that type of person that always ends up falling out with other people, so it's automatically their fault and not mine? When mistakes happen, we often like to point the finger at a single, isolated situation. Like, the mistake happened because person X was out of line and I ended up reacting in this way. But a lot of the times mistakes are multifactorial, meaning there are several things going on. It could be that you made a mistake. It could be your friend. It could be a complete stranger. It could be other people unnecessarily getting involved. It could be the environment. It could be pressures from family. It could be pressures from society. It could be pressures from a government perspective, or even a combination of all these things. Because mistakes are multifactorial, if you lived in a world on your own, mistakes would be easy. You just look at what you did wrong and then work on it. But you don't. You live in a reality with others where sometimes you may struggle to actually know where it all went wrong. You may never even truly find out what actually happened, what mistake happened and why. The second thing is learning. We need to approach the situation with the mindset that we're going to learn from it. There's no point you being the same person before a mistake as you are after a mistake. Like, do you think God would allow someone else to put you in hardship if he didn't think you could learn from it? If it didn't involve giving you an opportunity to grow? Mistakes are multifactorial. Did you make a mistake? Why did you make a mistake? Did you have a bad day? Are you under a lot of pressure? Are studies difficult? Is work stressful? Is someone unwell in your family? And flip the question on the other person. Did someone else make a mistake? Why did they make a mistake? Did they have a bad day? Are they under a lot of pressure? Are their studies difficult? Is their work stressful? Is someone unwell in their family? Everyone in this world is going through something. No one is exempt from tribulations. And yet we know all this, but we're still not willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. Now, let me ask you this. Let's take a second to just be really honest with ourselves. Is it only a mistake if you get caught? Is it only a mistake if you get caught? Like, if I make a mistake, unless I got caught, it's not really wrong. If I can get away with it, I might do it again. Well, if that's the case, does that mean that you'll only learn from your mistake once you get caught? That's not seeking the righteousness of God. That's seeking the righteousness from other people. Others may not know what truly has happened, but God does. God can see everything. There's no hiding from the omniscient. Let me ask you this. How many times did you feel you were right about something, and then later on find out you were wrong? Like, even times when you were 100% right, you were 100% confident, you made your statement with confidence. But later you find out you were wrong. You're not always right. None of us are. And that's okay. But if none of us are always right, we then need to have some flexibility with each other. We then need to be understanding towards one another. We need to have sympathy. The same way that you're not always right, the same way that you make mistakes, is the same way that others are not always right, is the same way that they also make mistakes. I'm going to touch briefly on reconciling, because today we're focusing more on learning from mistakes as opposed to forgiving and reconciling. But a couple of nice verses. Jesus says, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift." In the book of 1 John it reads, "If someone says, 'I love God,' and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he cannot see?" You know, reconciling can be very difficult. It can be very intense. especially when it's someone close to you that's really hurt you, and then you're expected to forgive and move on. It can make you feel lonely. You might be surrounded by so many people and yet feel incredibly isolated, incredibly uncomfortable. You sometimes even feel that God has left you. But God hasn't left you. God meets us where we are. You don't have to be perfect for God to be with you. Like the example with the Samaritan woman, Christ met her at the well. And likewise, Jesus meets us where we are. The Samaritan woman even tells a half-truth, and he praises her. You have said well. He wins her over. Christ wins her over. So she ends up becoming the first person that Jesus tells he's the Messiah to. So be like Jesus. Reconcile one another, even when it's not your fault. Before we get and dive deep into learning from mistakes, you need to first ask yourself this. Do you really want to learn from your mistakes? The harsh reality is, some people refuse to learn. Some people just refuse to learn. Like their parents will tell them not to drink alcohol, but they'll say, how can I know it's not good for me until I try it? Let me make a mistake. Let me learn from my mistakes. Like, back to the child. If a child sees a flame, they're going to want to touch the flame. Like, no matter how many times they're told by their parents not to touch the flame, the next time they get an opportunity, they will. What if you enjoy the mistake? What if you drink and then enjoy it? What happens next? Do you stop? Or just say, yeah, drinking is okay, provided I don't get drunk? So what happens one day when you are drunk? You may enjoy it. Are you willing to risk enjoying the mistake all because you want to try it, even though you've always known for it to be wrong? And from a spiritual perspective, who pays for the mistake? Christ does. When you confess and repent, your sins get transferred over from you to the crucified Christ, who is the ultimate sacrifice of our sins. Like, when we make mistakes, it's like we're crucifying Christ on the cross. Life is fascinating. Life is complex, but it's understood in simplicity. Life must be lived forwards, but it can only be understood backwards. Life is full of season. Timing is so critical in our lives. King Solomon, who was known for his wisdom, says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." Like, even to the basics. In comedy, the joke you make is only funny because of its timing. In music, it's sensational to the ears because of its timing. Everything is about timing. Time, time, time. King Solomon even goes to say, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. Time. Things going wrong isn't necessarily a bad thing. You ever gone through a phase in life where literally everything goes wrong? Like you make mistake after mistake after mistake. It almost feels like you can't get anything done right. Trials bring us closer to God. But the important thing is learning from trials. Being wise doesn't mean trials will never occur. Jesus tells a story of a foolish man who built his house with sand as the foundation, and a wise man who built his house on a rock. Later, a storm comes along, and as you would predict, the wise man's house remains standing, whereas the foolish isn't. It's interesting because it shows you that not even wisdom could stop the storm. Wisdom could anticipate the storm, but it could never stop it. And God in our lives never promises that there will be no storm, but he always promises to be with us in the midst of the storm. So you've made a mistake and you want to come out of it. What do you do next? There needs to be a turning point. You need to self-reflect. You need to process things. You need to be brutally honest with yourself. Jesus uses the story of the prodigal son to illustrate a turning point. The prodigal son made many, many mistakes and even ends up feeding the pigs for a living. But one day things changed and he returned back to his father's house. What happened? What changed his life around? He sat with himself. He reflected. He processed things. He took responsibility. He stopped blaming others. He said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against you. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." Now, when it comes to big mistakes in our lives, there's two things we can do to help process them. One is processing thoughts, and the second is expanding your circle. Processing things is key to your psyche. It's key to your mental health. A lot of the times people carry mistakes, carry burdens from the past, and this in turn causes trauma. And they never really face it. Then the trauma eventually faces them, and they break down. You can't ignore the past, and you don't need to dwell on the past either, but you need to face your past at some point and not sabotage your present and future. To tackle trauma, we need to essentially redirect the mind, go back to basics. You need to process your thoughts. So this is basically squaring up to your past, thinking things through. Some people write things down, some people go on a walk, some people go on holiday to help process things and try view things from another perspective. But there's a fine line. We're not running away from our mistakes. We're processing them. Like going on holiday every time life is difficult isn't the solution. It's like putting plaster on the wound. Yeah, it may help temporarily, but the plaster is going to fall off when you come back from your holiday. So it's not the solution. It can just provide you with a window to help process things. But going on holiday itself doesn't fix anything. You need to process things. Sometimes processing the past can be difficult. It can be very intense, even cause some people panic attacks. The body and the mind work in synergy. That's why people go to the gym when they're going through a rough time. And that's why it's recognized as a viable treatment option for conditions such as depression and anxiety. It helps you process things and raise your self-esteem. Sometimes facing the mind with the mind can be too difficult, too intense. So we use the body, i.e. exercise, to help win over the mind. From a spiritual perspective, the monks have a saying. It sounds better in Arabic, but I'm not going to attempt it. He who does not labor will struggle with many demons, but to him who labors, he will struggle with only one demon. I'll say it again. He who does not labor will struggle with many demons, but to him who labors, he will struggle with only one demon. In other words, the monk who does not labor, the devil will tempt them in many ways, like, come eat, look how good this meal looks, look what that person said about you, look what's happening to the church and our leaders are doing nothing about it, etc., etc. Whereas the monk who does labor has only one temptation, and that temptation is to rest. Because only when you're resting that the other temptations arise. In addition to processing our thoughts, the other thing we can do with big mistakes is expand our circle. In chronic pain, the long-term pain that I mentioned earlier, lasting longer than 3 months, which is harmful to the body, there's a massive psychosocial link where pain declines someone's mental health and mental health declines someone's pain. And you end up in this vicious cycle. Sometimes in healthcare, you can't stop someone's pain. Like if a patient has a condition that needs surgery, but we're unable to perform surgery because they're high risk, the surgery could bring complications, we don't know what's going to happen. What does that mean? That they're going to be in pain for the rest of their life because we can't operate on them? What do we then do? You can put them on painkillers. Painkillers work, yeah, but for a period of time. If you have chronic pain for years on end, you're going to build tolerance to these medications. It's not the solution. It's not a long-term fix. What we do instead is expand our circle. So can you see on the diagram there, the pain hasn't changed, that red bullseye. The pain hasn't changed, but they have. So it's less significant in their daily life, which allows them to then deal with the pain better. So how do you expand your circle? Religion, God. God gives us a sense of purpose. Surrounding yourself with loved ones, socializing, helping others. All these things are beneficial to help deal with your chronic pain. Trauma. We've already touched basis on it, but trauma is how much your past affects your present and therefore your future. Like, there's no metric. It's not if a really bad situation happens that we consider it traumatic. Because it could be a small situation, but affects you significantly, and that's your trauma. Because that same situation could happen to someone else and they'd process it fine, and it wouldn't be traumatic for them. Likewise, a big situation, a big mistake or a big circumstance could really impact you, and we call that trauma. But somebody else who's very strong, very disciplined in their own spiritual sense may experience the same thing and not be affected by that situation in the same way. So the trauma is dependent on how much the situation impacts you. It's personal to you. Now, I once shadowed a psychiatrist, and he was counseling a patient who had experienced trauma. He was saying that the aim of therapy isn't sometimes to forget the trauma. Sometimes the trauma is too intense that you can't forget what happened. But the problem with trauma isn't the memory. It's how much it controls you. And he used an analogy of having clothing just come out of the washing machine. When you take clothes out of the washing machine, it's everywhere. It's all over. You look left, you look right, you look up, you look down. It's everywhere. He was saying that the aim of therapy is to fold those pieces of clothing and put it in a drawer and close the drawer. So that whenever I want to have access to that memory, I go through the drawer, take that piece of clothing out. And whenever I want to put that memory away, I put that piece of clothing back and I close the drawer. I control the memory, it doesn't control me. I haven't forgotten what's happened, but I'm the one in charge. In mental health, they have a unique treatment called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And EMDR can be used to help treat trauma. As an example, say somebody saw a friend pass away while swimming at sea. They're likely to avoid swimming at sea for the rest of their life because they believe that the same thing will happen to them. Very logical so far. So there's two sides of the brain. The left side, which is logical, and the right side, which is creative, imaginative. When someone goes through trauma, there's a mismatch between the left and the right side of the brain. So the person thinks every time he goes swimming at sea, the same outcome will happen, even though statistically we know it's very unlikely. So there's this disbalance between the left and the right side of the brain. So EMDR tries to restore this. It tries to improve the communication between the left and right side. So the psychiatrist will help the patient process the trauma. They will take them back in time and talk about what happened. Talk about what the patient saw when their friend passed away. And whilst they're processing this trauma, they make the patient follow eye movement from left to right. And as a result, it tries to help correct the imbalance there and improve communication between the left and right-hand side of the brain. And therefore the brain, it becomes more logical. It knows that the next time you are at sea and swimming, it's unlikely for something to happen like what happened with their friend in the past. Now, at times, when you process trauma, it can be very intense. It can be very, very intense, to the point where some people get panic attacks and they end up avoiding it. But if you avoid the trauma and you don't process it, it's never going to go away. It's not going to magically one day disappear. And so before EMDR starts, they run through like a happy or a safe place for the patient, like being on a sunny beach, eating mangoes, drinking strawberries, whatever's your happy space. So that should the processing, when the psychiatrist takes that patient back in time to that memory, to that trauma, should things become too intense, they just pause and they go and think and visualize. Okay, think of that happy place. Think of that time when you're on a beach and you've got mangoes, strawberry juice, etc. And it just helps reset the tone. It allows the psychiatrist to dive deep into those distressing thoughts. When we've made mistakes, and we've all made mistakes, it's important to realize that you're only human. Like, you're prone to making mistakes. It's okay for things to go wrong. It's just life. But at the same time, balancing this, don't use that as an excuse to intentionally do something wrong. Ask for wisdom. In the book of James, it reads, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberty and without reproach, and it will be given to him." When you ask for wisdom, you don't just suddenly become wise, but God gives you many opportunities to be wise, and that in turn can come with its own challenges. But you can't have wisdom without patience. And wisdom is the key to learning from your mistakes. Patience, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated characteristics a person can have. Like, slow down, chill. Mental health is such a common problem in today's world, and it's the biggest challenge of our generation. We live in a fast-paced society, an Amazon Prime society. We want everything instantly, and this makes us lack patience. When we look at Jesus, we never see him rushing anywhere. We see him walking to Lazarus when he died and taking his time to reach him. We see him sleeping in the storm. We see Jesus patient. The devil, on the other hand, is restless, always rushing. When the devil visits God in the book of Job, it reads, "And the Lord said to Satan, 'From where do you come?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.'" It's an image of restlessness. The reason we have such a rise in mental health issues, such as anxiety and depression, is because we lack patience. The one who is patient is calm, and the one who is calm, by definition, cannot be anxious. The one who is patient is hopeful, And the one who is hopeful, by definition, cannot be depressed. You can't run away from your mistakes. You have to learn from them. Jonah tried to run away from God, and he ended up inside the big fish, a place where he literally couldn't run away from. You can't run away from your mistakes. You need to sit with yourself. You need to reflect. You need to process things. Find out what happened. Why did it happen? Reconcile the situation. Learn from the mistake and move on. Obtain wisdom. Be patient when it takes longer to move on, but also have that determination to want to move on. Don't get comfortable in your own discomfort. And when you've done all of this, when you've obtained that wisdom, when you've moved on from your mistakes, you can pass it down to others. You can help others out. Blessed be God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our tribulations, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Comfort others with the comfort Christ has given you. Comfort others. Thank you very much for listening.